Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today in my video I'm going to share a 10 cards 1 kit and a new one sheet wonder template and sketch. I am starting with this Fairies Kit from Scrappin' for Less. The reason I want to share this with you, I have guest designed for Scrappin' for Less a couple of times in the past. And Teresa, the owner of Scrappin' for Less, has recently decided to retire, which means that she will be selling off all of the items in her store. She asked some of her past guest designers if they would want to share the sale. And so I bought this kit and there was no compensation, but she just asked us to share. And because I love Scrappin' for Less, I have enjoyed working with their products. And I thought you guys might want to know about a sale that's 30% off. I would let you know. So in the video description, there'll be a link so you can go to Scrappin' for Less and you can get 30% off almost their entire store. This is one of their mini kits. So I believe it was part of a larger monthly kit. On their website, though, sometimes they had extras of just a particular part because their kits are made up of like 4 mini kits. And I just really liked this one. So I decided that I wanted to show you how you could take the one sheet wonder templates that I've been working on lately and use them with card kits. So here I'm doing my Copic Coloring. I'm doing E19, E15, and E13 for this little girl. Very simple shadows. The shadows would be like under her hair or where her clothes meet her body and things like that. I'm also going to generally, when I'm coloring, put the shadow on the right side here. I'm going to color all of both fairies and all of the other objects, the 2 butterflies, the mushroom, in the same color palette. And this saves me quite a bit of time. I do really simple Copic coloring, and all my markers are off there to the left. With the leaves, I tried to keep it really simple, but I did want to highlight the fact that because the leaves are layered on top of each other, some of them are going to be darker. That's kind of the main thing you want to consider there. I decided that I would color 12 fairies. There are 6 pieces of paper in the collection, and each of my one sheet wonder templates gives you 2 cards. So 6 papers, 12 cards. Therefore, I'm coloring 12 fairies so that I can put 1 on each card. I wanted to show you the sort of simple way that I color hair. You could obviously color hair more simply, but if you want to have a look of texture but don't want to go too crazy, I add flicks of color and I use usually about 3 colors. I start at the part in the center of the hair, then flick out. I think about any drop shadows, like where her head meets her hair, and I do some darker flicks there. And then I usually also add the darker flicks from the bottom of the hair. To color hair really realistically, you would want to do a bit more than that. You'd want to think about like where the light is, and there might be several highlights. But on these smaller images, I like to keep it simple, but still have a little bit of texture. So that's why I just make some simple decisions like putting the shadows at the part and at the bottom and under where her face, meets her hair, or her head meets her hair. I go in with the darkest, then the middle, and then the lightest. Then I go back with the middle and add a few more flicks. That helps to create a less of like a sort of harsh transition from the lightest to darkest color. I'm going to show you here my one sheet wonder templates in my card sketch binder. So I made my one sheet wonder templates and sketches into a PDF so you could print them off. And the reason that I did that is because I personally keep a card sketch binder and I know a lot of other people do, so I thought that would be a way for you to easily access them. You can see I also have some ink swatches in the back of the binder just in case you're curious what my binder looks like. I have some sketches printed out from MFT and deconstructed sketches, and then some other random ones. You can go over to my blog. The link will be in the video description. and print out this PDF where on the left it shows you how to cut the 6x6 paper, and then on the right it shows you the sketch. Then I also have in my sketch binder here the other sketches that I made, and they are also available as a PDF. So not really relevant to this particular video, but I know some people are aware of my card sketch binder and may want to know how I'm incorporating these new things into it, or you might not have known about it before and might find it a useful resource. So I'm going to cut up all of the papers according to my templates. If you don't have this kit, and there aren't many of this kit left the last time that I was able to look before recording this video, you can go to your collection of 6x6 paper, your stamps, your, various embellishments, and make a very similar kit. I have 6 papers in this kit, but there's only 5 designs, so maybe just pick out 5 pieces of pattern paper that kind of go well together. I like the double-sided. This paper, a couple of the pieces have directionality, like they can only really go one way, otherwise things look like they're upside down, but there are some templates, particularly I believe templates number 1 and 3 work well even if your paper only has one up direction. So like this paper here, there's only one direction that is actually up, and this template, which I believe is number 3, accommodates that. However, these papers are double-sided, and I will be taking advantage of that. If in your collection you don't have double-sided paper, you can consider mixing up, like cutting part of template 3 from one sheet of paper, and then since all of them you basically start by cutting the sheet in half, you'll see I do that with every single one. I'm cutting my 6x6 paper into 3x6. You can mix it up, and so once you cut them in half, you can cut your half your pieces for the template in one paper and the other half in the other, and then, swap them. I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry if it's not very clear. I don't really know a better way to explain it. Maybe I will try to make a video on it in the future. And then I would suggest, picking a stamp set that goes with it. Obviously, that was done for me. And then some embellishments that you want to use up. There was a little bit of twine. There were some sequins. Just to be honest, I'm not going to use the sequins. And there were some flowers, which I will use. So go into your stash, like what do you have that you want to use or get rid of, and use up, and include those in your own little kit. I'm not going over the measurements or talking about what I'm cutting because all the templates are over on my blog. And I think that that's much easier. If somebody tries to say all the measurements out loud to me, I just wind up getting confused anyway. So sorry if you're more of a verbal learner and the visuals don't help as much, but I'm not very good at that kind of thing. I mess up all the time, as you already know from watching this video. All right. So I wanted to do like a 10 cards, 1 kit video. Although I do wind up doing 12 because there are 6 pieces of paper. With that in mind though, I needed to come up with if I wanted to do 10 cards, I felt like I need to come up with a new one sheet wonder. So this is what I'm cutting now is one sheet wonder number 5. The measurements for this one are a little bit tricky just because we're talking about 1/8 of an inch instead of 1/4 of an inch in terms of getting exactly the right size that I wanted for those 2 smaller strips. So their measurements are going to be a little bit more precise. If you find, I write all of my measurements in decimals on my projects. I think, that's less confusing for me, but I know some people prefer fractions. I would just put it into Google and ask it to convert, put in the decimal and ask it to turn it to a fraction. And that way it'll work out for you, and maybe record those on the sketch. I would consider recording both on my sketches. However, there's just not enough room. And the computer does not like fractions nearly as much in terms of the placement on. Anyway, I'm going to, now that I have all my papers cut, separately off camera, I'm going to cut all the cardstock. If you go to the sketches, you find out what cardstock sizes you need. Then, once I have all of that ready, I'm ready to start designing or assembling the cards. None of my sketches have put the sentiment here. The reason for that is because I don't use like the same size sentiment, and I don't feel the need to be that specific for sketches. It's just not, like the more specific a sketch is, sometimes the harder it is for me to work with. I just kind of want to know the basic shapes, the large elements, and then I can go from there. So I'm going to take my Whimsy stamps. Oh, it's a label set. I can't remember the name. Sorry about that, guys. I've used it a lot, so you think I would remember the name, but I really like it because it includes so many different like sentiment strip type things. And so I took two, this rounded one and this traditional banner one, which I did use in my very last video with the dinosaur paper pad as well. I cut both of them out of a scrap of cardstock. I took the negative space, I taped it in my MISTI, and now I can stamp two sentiments at once. You don't need a MISTI, you don't need to stamp two at once. I don't know that it even saved me that much time, to be honest, because I feel like I have to fuss to get them straight. But then if I were using like a stamping block, I would probably fuss to get them straight all the time too, and maybe would stamp a few crooked and then want to redo them. But I knew I was making 12 cards, so I cut out 6 of each sentiment strip, and then I'm going to load them into my MISTI one at a time. I'm using Catherine Pooler Party Dress ink. I decided to go with a pink ink to coordinate with the paper pad. When you're picking out your own, if you're trying to make your own kit, or actually this is relevant either way, I looked at the paper pad to decide what colors to color the fairies. Every single paper had pink and green. Some papers had blue, some papers had yellow, but all of them had the pink and green. So that's why I decided to choose those colors for the fairies, so that I knew they would go with every single paper, because I hadn't decided which paper they would all go with yet. And I suggest doing something similar, like find the predominant color of the little like collection you've composed for yourself. I'm going to only show like partial assembling of the cards and mostly the designing of the cards, with the idea that, the sketch is giving you most of the direction, but I'm going to try to share some design ideas. I hope this video has some value in that sense. So I want to use up those flowers because they're included with the kit. I don't like them with this sketch because the focal point area of this sketch is quite small. And so if I add that flower in there, it kind of overwhelms that area. I picked the 2 sentiments based on how they fit inside of my dies, but I picked the dies based on the fact that I wanted one that was slightly smaller, which is the sort of traditional banner, and one that's slightly bigger, which is the circle banner. And each sketch, like, I will think about which one makes more sense. That first sketch, the area was so small, I went with the smallest sentiment. Here, this piece of cardstock, the top layer, is going to overlap the other one partially, and then the rest of it's going to sit on the card base. You would have, because there's cardstock and pattern paper, if you were to place this directly down and try to glue it fully to the card, it would maybe look a little lumpy. If you want it to look really smooth, what I did there was I took a scrap of cardstock and I added it to the part that's going to overlap the card so that it's a little bit more even across, and the part that's hanging over the card isn't having to go all the way down to the card base, kind of over those layers of cardstock in the background. Again, I know I'm not super great at explaining these things. I'm really just trying my best. And I know that Christy Marcotte does that as well, so maybe she explains it better. And I would suggest checking out her channel because she is incredibly talented as well. All right, so there I went with the larger sentiment, and I used one of the flowers because the sort of main focal point area on that sketch is larger. So that's my logic there. As you can see, I have the sequins on my desk, and I'm like, I should use these, but sequins are just really not my style, guys. I think they're beautiful, and I have a lot of them, but I just don't use them very well. And so sorry if you were looking for some like inspiration about how to do that. I have in the past, and I think that they would look pretty on these cards. I think that you could add them around the sentiments, especially because it says things like may your day sparkle. Like that seems like it should call for a sequin, something sparkly, and those sequins do work really well for it. But it's just, again, not so much my style, so I kind of struggled to use them. I did decide to stamp some of the elements from the stamp set, like some of the smaller elements. There was like a little lantern that I felt like would be hard to use on these simpler cards, but then things like the butterfly and the mushroom, I thought that would make it look a little bit more well-rounded and special. But by keeping the color palette so simple, like I made sure the butterflies were just pink and the same pink that was on the girls' dresses, and the mushrooms, like maybe traditionally you would think they should be red, but I didn't want to add a bunch of extra colors. I wanted to keep things simple and easy to match. And so that's why I went with the pink mushroom as well. And then there's not a lot of green. In fact, the only green is there in the little fairies' skirts. And so by keeping the color palette really limited, it made it easy to assemble a bunch of different pattern paper cards. And I don't even have to worry, particularly if I have just the right green or just the right pink, because there are a couple of greens and pinks in the collection. So that also was, a consideration, that because I did not choose a more solid paper where I have to, or perhaps should more closely match, but instead I went with a paper pad that had various colors, like various shades of pink. It made it a little less like, oh my gosh, is this really matching, when I went with my Copic colors. So here is the new One Sheet Wonder. I'll talk briefly about it just because the other ones have more dedicated videos. This one, I could see how some people would be like, well, technically that those two pieces that are underneath, there's a lot of them that are being covered by that larger piece, like the butterfly one, that is much bigger, and the strips are being like tucked under it. So I guess you could consider that like scrap or waste in this instance. I consider that most of the sketches have that larger focal point covering part of the strips underneath, and so I was fine with it. Let me know what you guys think. Like, does that still feel like an authentic, no scrap way of cutting it? Or would you prefer to see things that maybe aren't as, wasteful? I mean, I don't really have a problem. I think it works out, but I could see how someone's like, you're using a lot bigger of a piece there than you need. So is that really an efficient use of the paper? Up for debate for sure. This is where I use the twine. The twine was actually like just enough to wrap around both of these twice. And so I had to use the extra tape, because if I just kind of kept wrapping, I wouldn't have had enough. However, I do think that this kind of showed me that, because there were a couple of cards where I could have seen myself using this twine. And so I think that if you do have some ribbon, twine, fiber of some sort that you really want to use, I do think that there are several of these One Sheet Wonder sketches that I've shared that would actually work out really, really well for using those things up. I have two fairies that aren't colored. I miscounted. I only colored 10 of them. And then I realized that there's a reason that this one's partially colored. I was supposed to finish coloring. I thought I had too many and I didn't, but I will color them off screen, but I just wanted to finish the designing so that I could get this video out sooner rather than later. If I stopped and colored them, it would have delayed the video more. So sorry about the random blank fairies there. So the last piece of paper I just picked two of the designs that I thought would work well with it, and I made duplicates. I went with the craft cardstock because even though there actually is no brown in the paper pad, I thought it would work out really well because it's easy to get craft cardstock. You can buy it in bulk, and it worked well with the collection because it's a very natural color. Like they, fairies and all the in the background has like a lot of flowers and stuff. And so, that's also a nature color. And then it would let me use white card bases. So that's it for my cards today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll check out the blog where you can get the templates and more inspiration, see still pictures, measurements, etc. I will leave you some links in the video description to the products that I use, to the Scrap and for Less store where you can get a good discount right now. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.